Before we begin, I'd like to give a very special shout out to Clever Dick Films, whose hard work jump-started this ignorant American's education in the wilderness era, and whose encouraging words inspired me to get this thing done. Doctor Who has had one constant companion over the last 60 years.
Who's that?
Death.
Okay, that's a little bit dramatic. But it is true to say that the show's future has never been certain. In the 60s, when the show first started, before it even started really, it was given a shoestring budget and only weeks to justify its existence. Its future was called into question when William Hartnell's health began to fail, and was only saved through the magic of regeneration, something that we all look over quite frequently as how significant it was for the show's survival. In the 70s, it took a massive overhauling of the show's format and production to save it from the abysmal ratings of the late Troughton era. Well, then came the early 80s when BBC One controller Michael Grade put the show on its first hiatus, lasting 18 months. And by the end of the 80s, it would enter hiatus once more. However, this time, it would last far longer than only 18 months, and became a period that we fans refer to as the Wilderness Era. The modern Doctor Who revival may have saved us from the wilderness, but the axe has continued to loom the entire time. From the early exit of the show's lead in Christopher Eccleston, to the questionable sustainability of the show in the wake of fan favorite David Tennant leaving, to the show's low ratings and the production nightmare that was the Chris Chibnall era. The threat of cancellation has always remained. That may be truer now than ever, though, as uncertainty with the lead actor and the streaming distributor, as well as questionable viewing figures, all make fans feel uneasy about the show's future. In the face of all of this uncertainty, there's actually a growing movement within the fandom, a call to let the show rest. Yes, it seems some fans actually want another hiatus, as if they think this will be what saves the show in the long run. Now, we can discuss the merits of that, but first, I have a question I would like to ask you personally, you fans who are calling for the show's departure from our screens. And that is, do you have what it takes to keep the fandom alive in the wilderness? Welcome to the All Trades Jack channel. I am the titular titillating Jack, and I am back with another Who-USA from the USA. In this series, I, a big-headed and uninformed American, speak ad nauseum about the British cultural institution that is Doctor Who, all while trying not to become an enemy of the crown. Today's Who-USA, what awaits us in the wilderness, and what will emerge from it? I understand how some fans arrived at the idea that time away from our screens might do the show some good in the long run. After all, the 2005 revival series brought with it so many new ideas, along with fresh talent, young blood, that really revitalized what Doctor Who could be and what it meant to modern viewers of sci-fi television. The era was defined by brilliant stories, brand new and redesigned creatures alike, and a completely different approach to set design, costume design, and special effects. It's really hard to look at what came before and what came after and say that the series didn't benefit in many ways from the time spent off screen. However, it would also be disingenuous to think that it was as simple as distance making the heart grow fonder. Nothing inherently improves for taking a break and coming back. That's not how entropy works. And you would think that modern fans would really get that, considering the era we've been living through these last 20 years. And I'm not talking about Doctor Who, I'm talking about just TV and movies in general. After all, intellectual properties like Masters of the Universe, Ghostbusters, Star Trek, Indiana Jones, The Mummy, and The Crow all garnered a great deal of love and fan devotion before disappearing from our screens for anywhere from a decade to many decades. Yet when each of these properties made their long-awaited return to the big screen, they came back hollow. They came back lacking the charm and personality and the ineffable sense of specialness, which tends to get lost when Hollywood decides to breathe new life into long-rested properties. I don't think anyone would say that the Star Wars sequels, for instance, were made better for the decade plus spent on hiatus. Nor were original trilogy fans satisfied by the prequels, simply because it had been 20 plus years since they'd seen scrolling yellow text in the theaters. Of course, you're probably thinking that I'm not being fair, because those are, after all, movies. And Doctor Who is a sci-fi TV show, not made by Hollywood. So, fair point. But to that point, I'd mention other sci-fi TV shows and their recent reboots in our modern TV culture. Just look at Lost in Space, or The Twilight Zone, or Knight Rider, or Bionic Woman, or Quantum Leap. All these shows had plenty of time away from our screens, only to come back devoid of what made the original versions special. Fans didn't turn out to watch them. Critics panned them. And they were all canceled or ended before reaching the heights of their predecessors. What am I saying? I'm saying that time away means nothing if the team charged with bringing a show back doesn't understand what made that show special in the first place. Time away means nothing if the fan base scatters to the winds over the intervening years and they don't come back in numbers. Time away as the only factor will do nothing to improve the quality of a show. The 2005 Doctor Who revival wasn't the success it was because it was gone for so long. It was the success it was because of what happened while it was gone. And we need to be really, really clear about that as fans, because you all just might get your wish soon. I know someone's always saying it, because as we've said, the uncertainty has always been there. I know it. Someone's always saying the show is going to get canceled, and that may feel like a whole lot of FUD. But the show is going to go off the air soon. That, I believe, is a fact, at least for an extended period of time. Even if the best case scenario occurs and Disney renews the series for season 3, right? And it doesn't get canceled, there will still be an off year. There will be a year at least, since pre-production hasn't started and can't start until that announcement. And that announcement isn't coming until season 2 wraps. However, if Disney doesn't renew, there's no knowing how long the show will leave our screens. If you, as a fan, don't do what is required of you now and in the days to come, then this monkey's paw will extract a heavy, heavy toll when your asked-for hiatus comes to its inevitable end. Obviously, I can't actually say with any certainty when or how the show will go off the air. But considering the deal with Disney is so uncertain, and since some of you fans are asking for it anyway, I'm going to treat the show's end as a foregone conclusion for the purposes of this video. I don't want to hear you all saying, oh, all trades, Jack, you're being all doom and gloom, and everyone says the show's going to get canceled. That's not a hot take. I'm not trying to make a hot take about whether or not the show is going to get canceled. I am hypothetically posing what will happen in a future where the show gets canceled, since you guys seem to want it to be canceled, or at least go on hiatus. So I am going to treat that as a foregone conclusion, and I'm going to give it the most generous framing I can so that we can discuss what a hiatus looks like and what we can truly expect from a hiatus and what comes next. So we're going to suppose that Disney doesn't sign a new contract for season 3, and there will be no worldwide distributor. Bearing that in mind, we'll also go ahead and say that the BBC will seek new worldwide distributors before greenlighting a new series of episodes. I know RTD says that he would keep doing it on the BBC, but he doesn't get to make that choice. You know, BBC might want the bag, and they might say, oh, Doctor Who's not really worth it if we can't make the millions. We're not going to water down the property doing old school style Doctor Who in the meanwhile. No, we're going to do big Doctor Who or nothing. So we're going to take that framework where the BBC wants the distributor before we move forward. Given that, we'll also say that RTD and Ncuti will leave in the wake of the hiatus, and that a new show will have the same starting circumstances as the 2005 revival had, since that does seem to be what the fans asking for a hiatus are looking for. They want to see a fresh start with fresh young blood, new ideas like we were talking about before. That means whoever brings it back also has to find new producers, new writers, new musicians, new actors for the entire production. This will effectively be making a brand new era of the show, the same way RTD had to do. That is our framework for discussing what happens next. Do I think that is what's going to happen next? I don't fluxing know. I just am trying to have a conversation about the specific statement that the show should rest a while because it would be good for it. That's where we jump in here. I will say, though, the only area that I am not going to be so generous in discussing this is the timeline itself. Because, yeah, maybe it is only 18 months while they do the turnaround for the season 3 production or whatever. Or maybe they've already got a backup deal with HBO and they are going to line something up and it's just going to be a little hiatus and they never actually cancel it. But just remember, the hiatus, which we call the wilderness years, was never officially called a cancellation. It was always supposed to come back. And remember that when you hear RTD talking about the future and all his unconfirmed plans, but I digress. We will be talking about the show's return as an inevitability. However, the when of it all will be nebulous. Anywhere from an 18-month turnaround to make season 3 to a 15-year-long stretch of wilderness, okay? We may look at some different hypotheticals along the way just to explore the different facets of the underlying question at the heart of this video, which is, do you, as a fan, have what it takes to survive in the wilderness? And again, what kind of show will your fandom earn you when you emerge from said wilderness? Oh yeah, I said earn. I believe that we, the fandom, will get the exact show that we earn when the inevitable cycle of death and regeneration brings about a new era of Doctor Who. Now you're probably saying to yourself something like, it's not our responsibility as fans to make Doctor Who good, Jack. That's the BBC's job. To that, I'd say, you're talking to a screen. I can't hear you. You've got to put it in the comments. But then I'd say the success of the 2005 revival was built on the backs of hardcore, dedicated fans who played their part as both custodian and torchbearers of the show in a time when it did not pay to be either. After all, just look at these facets of the show which we now think of as the establishment, which began as the dreams of Wilderness-era fans. Take Mark Gatiss, for example. I'm not a huge fan of his, and these days he's basically just part of the BBC Boys Club. He's a made man and an integral part of the establishment of Doctor Who, with multiple script writing, screenwriting, voice acting, and character portrayals to his name. But in the Wilderness years, he was just another fan. Though if you think that means he was just like any of us, you may not be aware of what Mr. Gatiss did to express his fandom across the many years spent in the Wilderness. The first time Doctor Who fans became aware of Gatiss was with a story called Nightshade, which was a part of a series of books known as The New Adventures, which we will talk more about shortly. He also appeared in, or was otherwise involved in, a multitude of fan-made Doctor Who productions when there was otherwise no official content for us to enjoy. This includes interviews and documentaries made with Real-Time Productions and standalone adventures made by BBV Productions. The most significant of these was the much-loved cult classic Probe, a series which sees classic companion Liz Shaw return to the Whoniverse to start her own paranormal investigations. Gatiss not only wrote the first 4 of these fan films, but he also played multiple roles within them. Regardless of how you or I feel about Mark Gatiss or his contributions to modern Doctor Who, or his position within the larger landscape of the BBC, it cannot be argued that he earned his place among the fandom for his custodianship during the most uncertain time in the history of Doctor Who. Even without anything else, even without the books, even without the documentaries, without the interviews, his work on Probe alone would be enough to secure him a seat at the table, in my eyes at least. The love and devotion of the fans behind these productions and their Herculean efforts cannot be understated. Their sense of pride and professionalism lent the production an air of credibility, enough so to attract former Doctor Who actors, including multiple actors who played the Doctor and those who played companions. They attracted these actors despite the low budget, the non-BBC unlicensed properties, and the fact that they were probably not making half the money they could have made doing other projects. This was a passion project by people who just loved the show and couldn't bear to see it go away. I should stop here and say that I haven't seen Probe. Why? Because the DVDs are ridiculously expensive, but they are still sold on the BBV website if you want to check them out. However, in my research for this video, I found a wonderful little channel that has become a new favorite of mine called the Medusa Cascade. If y'all haven't found them yet, check the link in my description. They're listed there. And they did a reaction to a bunch of Wilderness era stuff, including all of the Probe videos. And they include a lot of the dialogue and footage from it. So if you want to get a taste, it's going to spoil it for you, but if you want to get a taste of what those are all about before you sink $120 into buying the DVDs, I think it's worth checking out. And Medusa Cascade is a wonderful channel with just a very charming host who I think that if you're watching this, you'll love that. But it was through this channel that I got my first glimpse at so many Wilderness stories that I was either aware of but had never seen or totally unaware of. That includes Wartime, Shakedown, the Autons. They're just a few of these fan-made productions which I was, like I said, previously unaware of or hadn't seen, and which are now becoming an obsession for me at this point. I really am like, I've had to fight myself to not drop hundreds of dollars on DVDs because I'm so enthralled by the stuff fans were making in this era. Now, once you've taken an opportunity to watch and absorb these Wilderness era contributions and remember that they were unofficial products made by people who just loved the show so much that they refused to let the property go cold, you have to ask yourself, what would you have been doing? in the same position. Would you write a spec script for a project that you had no guarantee could get made? Would you spearhead a project which would require you to convince Billie Piper to take a massively reduced fee in order to reprise her role, and a project that wouldn't work if you didn't have her? Would you commit to playing a role in a fan-made film alongside Peter Capaldi, knowing the remaining fan base would crucify you if you tainted his legacy? To me, it's impossible to look at these works and imagine modern fans taking such a big swing. On that note, I have seen the arguments online that suggest the existence of fan spaces on the internet will insulate us from the effects of another wilderness era. But I think that is woefully ignorant of how different our parasocial relationships are in this age of the internet from the kind of relationships that fans in the wilderness era had with the show and with each other. If these people making this point simply mean that there will always be interest in the show, I can maybe see that. Here's an example. Supposing the new era of the show does get announced, right? I do expect that online communities would rally and give us those first day views on a new series. People would watch it. If that's what you mean, I do believe you're right about that. But that is a very passive view of fandom and misses out on everything else that being a fan represents. I have a different line of questions that I'm trying to probe here. Will the fans be good champions for the show online? Will they effectively communicate their needs? Or will they only express outrage and discontentment and not provide any kind of useful, actionable feedback? Suppose, for instance, that the show goes off the air for a period of 18 months and no news comes out about the future of the series. Fans will start to speculate, as they did then and do now, and to placate fans, BBC does some red nose, blue Peter, comic relief type sketch to fill the void. Imagine, for instance, that they make something in the vein of Dimensions in Time. In the current internet culture, in the current climate of internet culture, what would the internet's reaction be to a Dimensions in Time? Would the existence of fan spaces insulate the show the way that fans think that it will? I have my doubts. For those of you who are blissfully unaware of Dimensions in Time, let me just ruin that for you. It was the grand celebration for Doctor Who's 30th anniversary. You know how much Doctor Who loves its anniversaries. And everyone hated it because it was bad. It was a Children in Need special starring multiple doctors and their companions, which sounds good on paper up to this point, except it was also in 3D and acted as a crossover with the show EastEnders. Additionally, it had an incohesive story, below average effects, even for classic Who standards, and featured a painfully awkward live show element to it, with Jon Pertwee in character wearing branded 3D glasses. And I'm pretty sure this is also the last appearance of Jon Pertwee as the Doctor, which is just... God, that's just... I think nail in the coffin might be a bit too morbid of a... Yeah, let's just not touch that. For Americans, the closest thing you could compare it to would be the Star Wars Holiday Special. Except take that and put it in 3D and put the entire cast of Dallas in it as well. And then you kind of get on to what Dimensions in Time was. So now that you have an idea, if you didn't already, what would happen if the BBC released content such as this in today's day and age? Well, I think the internet would probably break into two camps. On one side, there would be those who give a one-word review of the product and promptly forget it and the show that spawned it. They'd say mid, or they'd say cringe. And then they would move on with their lives and never look back. If ever you brought up the subject of Doctor Who to that crowd, they'd reference the most memeable moment that the 12-minute sketch produces, have a laugh, and go back to forgetting the show exists.
Madam, what year is this?
2013. Yeah, I can remember exactly where I was when Kennedy was assassinated.
The rest of those fans, the ones in the other camp, those inclined to creative endeavors and capable of making sentences longer than one syllable, might give the subject more thought and attention. But in order to adhere to the internet's most sacred rules, those rules that the negative spin alone drives content and engagement, and that the algorithmic value of content is all that matters, if they're adhering to those rules, all that thought and engagement would likely manifest in some video essay which asks the question, was Doctor Who ever good? I mean, you don't have to look very far at all to find dozens on dozens of examples of fandoms suffering through this fate right now. I already mentioned a few of them above, and I'm sure you can think of many, many more. I have a hard time believing modern fans would do the kinds of things those Wilderness fans did. And I'm not talking about from a creative standpoint exclusively, because not all people are creative like that. Yeah, yet in the Wilderness, everyday people without a lot of creative skill still put their time and effort into bringing back Doctor Who. For instance, less than a year after the show was taken off the air unceremoniously, more than 1,000 fans gathered in what they called the Doctor Who Day of Action, where they protested at BBC headquarters and demanded that the show be put back on the telly. Now, this may not have garnered much. I don't really think it did. If you're to believe John Nathan Turner, their protests did irreparable damage to the show, but I don't really believe that either. Never believe the BBC's official line. Don't ever, no matter what it is. But good or bad, success or failure, they did something. And I'm just not sure that you could get that kind of rise out of the internet fan base of today. We need that level of engagement so that when and if the show leaves again, we can ensure it comes back better than before. Because like I said, time away on its own is not enough. Sure, the end of any Doctor Who's hiatus might be inevitable, but what good is it if it comes back with a distanced, cynical audience and a studio who has no faith in it? Under those circumstances, the show won't come back because fans demanded it, or because there are creatives behind the scenes chomping at the bit to revive a show that they love and act as a champion for on behalf of those starving fans. Those kinds of creatives who are just fans themselves. No, it'll come back because BBC needs money, and the IP isn't serving their checkbook currently. And they'll probably do what they've done like a bunch of times at this point, shopping it around to find the best deal that they can get. They'd likely end up with some knucklehead who sees the online discourse and decides that they know best. And despite having only a surface level knowledge of the show's vast history, they'll treat us to another Lost in Space or another Twilight Zone, another hollow retread that doesn't capture the show's spirit. If fans want a hiatus to result in the revival akin to 2005, we have to acknowledge that we need super fans to bear the torch for the rest of us and to get creatively involved before the BBC decides they're ready to cash in. After all, They didn't just make a new series and seek someone out and just happen to stumble across RTD, who was a golden goose. It didn't happen that way. Russell T Davies made a name for himself around the BBC as that annoying bloke who was always bugging people about Doctor Who. He also didn't wait for the show's return to write stories in the world. The man who brought Doctor Who out of the wilderness was a fan who became a creator in the depths of that long, quiet darkness. Years before he was given the show, he wrote a book called Damaged Goods, another novel in that series we were talking about before, The New Adventures, which, let's get into that a little bit.
Hey y'all, it's 3:42 in the morning. This is all editing Jack, just coming in as I sometimes do to correct original recipe Jack. This is Ash Catchum. He's a friend to everybody who hangs out around here, so leave a comment for Catchum. But also, leave a comment to roast original recipe Jack, because he got some very basic stuff wrong in the following section. How basic? A very important man's name. You're going to hear him say Paul Corner about 15 times, and it's Paul Cornell. This is a very simple mistake that you wouldn't make if A, your handwriting was better, and B, you didn't wear sunglasses while trying to read said script. But original recipe Jack, he's a madman, and I can't control what he does because he's always in the past and I'm always in the future. It's wibbly wobbly, it's timey-wimey, but he messes this up multiple times, and we're going to roast him for it in the comments. But know that I am sleeping on this man because I didn't know his history before I did the research for this. But even so, I should have known the episodes he made in Modern Who and thrown him some more respect and at least said his name right. Paul Corner. You should see my handwriting, I swear. But anyway, let's listen to this moron get the name wrong.
The series of The New Adventures began when Virgin Books bought out Target Books, who had previously made the novelizations of old episodes. The creative lead, I think his name was Darville Evans, hired an unknown writer who was a fan of the show to pen a Doctor Who novel. The writer was Paul Corner. He was best known at the time as a fanzine writer. If you don't know what a zine is, it's because we live in the age of the internet and we don't have the kind of fandom we used to have. But Corner was a fanzine writer who had been writing fan fiction and was given the chance to make one of his stories canon. There had been, like I said, the series of novelizations before this, but Paul Corner's book was special. It was a brand new story, and it was a signal to other fans that their stories too could be a part of Doctor Who. And other future show writers, such as Shakespeare Code writer Gareth Roberts, and of course Mark Gatiss, who we talked about, were among these early writers for The New Adventures. Fans turned writers who would bear the torch during this darkness and would be rewarded for it on the other side with official show credits. RTD was just one of many fans to become Doctor Who writers this way. And his love and respect for those other writers is very obvious. And it's abundantly clear when you begin to see how many characters and aliens and planets and whole storylines were either adapted from or lifted fully out of Virgin Books and Big Finish Productions. On that note, let's take a second to consider Big Finish. It, like Mark Gatiss, is a cornerstone of Doctor Who these days. It is a cornerstone of Doctor Who content. But what was it in its inception? In the 80s, before they were a whole production company associated with the BBC, they were just a collective of creatives making unlicensed audio reproductions of Doctor Who stories. That was when the show was still on the air, though. And when it went off the air and started to become clear it wasn't coming back, at least for some time, they made a drastic pivot and risked it all for the sake of the fandom. They brought in people from across said fandom, including those who had worked on the BBV productions and the real-time productions, and they came together to make the first audio drama, not knowing if it would lead to anything else. They combined their experience, their technical knowledge, their resources, their talents, and their passion for the property to make something for all of us. And they brought it to the BBC, who could easily have said no. And then Big Finish would have folded. Instead, they not only created a realm in which stories could continue, but they established a permanent and vital component of Doctor Who fandom forevermore. One that we might be very thankful to have if we enter another wilderness. And yet most modern fans of the show specifically, they don't even listen to Big Finish. Now, obviously, most of us fans aren't going to do anything like that for any show. But supposing you are a person of greater means, someone, say, with funds and a large platform and a network of fans at your fingertips, would you bankroll all that hard-earned social and material capital to produce a spin-off project? Even knowing that the consolidated forces of BBC and Disney couldn't make it profitable? I think any of us who spend a lot of time in Doctor Who spaces on the internet can name at least a few Whovian content creators who are chomping at the bit to be a part of the show, to play a character in Doctor Who, or to play the Doctor even, or to write an episode, or to direct an episode, or to do set design. If you happen to be my personal favorite Whotuber, you may even have a years-long campaign for the position of showrunner. And so, I'm going to pose this question to you, Crispy. And I'm going to pose it to you because, for one, I think the world of your work. And secondly, I trust you to understand where I'm coming from and to know that I'm having an open debate and I'm not actually coming at you in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, I love your work. And so when I ask you this, know that I'm asking everybody, but I'm going to use you as my focal point. If the algorithm didn't reward you for it, would you keep making the Doctor Who content you are? Bear in mind that at this point, I'm just asking if you'd keep doing what you are doing. I'm not even asking if you'd pivot and make a whole documentary. I'm not even asking if you'd invest in recruiting writers and actors and effects experts and designers and directors to make fan films in the vein of Probe. Or, to strip back some of those elements, some of the visual elements just to make an audio drama in the form of a Big Finish. I'm just asking if you'd continue to do the same level of content and fan engagement you currently do if the show went off the air for a period of years and the algorithm stopped rewarding you for said content. To use an American analogy, you know me, would you invest in Doctor Who when the market collapses and there's an opportunity to take great risk for unimaginable future rewards that are not certain? If we go years without official content, would you risk your platform, your income, and your reputation to make something real for the fans? Are you willing to be known as the Doctor Who guy when that name only evokes memes and anti-woke rage and fan cynicism? I mean, bear in mind that 80% of modern Doctor Who was made by showrunners who bought in during the wilderness years. RTD with his Virgin Book and one-man revival campaign, Stephen Moffat with Curse of Fatal Death. So really, truly, I'm asking you, Crispy, how bad do you want to be showrunner? Because I swear, I love your stuff. I really do. I love your ideas, and I've been following you for what feels like ages at this point. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I hate being the bearer of bad news, but You aren't going to break into the boys club at BBC, and you're not going to break into the boys club at Doctor Who. And I don't just say that because you're an Australian. You know, they don't want Australians, they don't want Americans. It's a BBC thing, I get that, but that's not even what I'm talking about. If the Disney era continues, if RTD2 continues, the next showrunner and the next showrunner and the next will all be sourced from a tiny pool of talent who have been associated with the show for years. You need to get a writing credit or two now. And one or two of those needs to be a smash hit. And then you need to stick around for maybe 20 more years until it maybe is your turn if you kissed all the right asses along the way. To get back to my super American analogy, currently a small trust owns the controlling shares of Doctor Who. No amount of investment from you at your current level will ever get you a seat at the table. Your best bet is to invest in the bull market. When the show is gone, when the value of those stocks plummets, that's when you need to invest harder than ever. Those 40K subscribers, and I'm rounding up because you'll get there, those 40K subscribers are your capital, your platform, your network, your connections. All of those are your assets, and those are what you would need to invest in that bull market. Would you leverage all of that if it means your name becomes synonymous with the show? Would you risk losing all of that so that you can be the name that comes up when talks of reboots come along? I will be there with you, I swear, and I would walk with you through the wilderness to see it happen. But it would be up to you to lead me the whole way without any assurances, with possibly no end in sight. Are you that guy? To be clear, I'm singling out Crispy because I love his work and I think he's got a pretty good temperament and will take this the right way, but also because #Crispy for showrunner. But this applies to anyone who wants to be a part of Doctor Who in an official capacity. If you are willing to sacrifice for us all when there is no monetary incentive to do so, true Whovians will cement you within our collective history. I'm also I'm looking at other specific channels. I'll call out a few. I'm looking at you, TT Productions. Crispy can be the post-Wilderness showrunner, and y'all could be the next big finish. I believe you have what it takes to make it through the wilderness, just based off the scale and quality of your work now that you're doing right now, and without the promise of rewards now. Like, I believe you could do it. I'm also looking at you, Who Chase. Don't think I'm just singling out one per category. We'll need your full range of skills when the show goes off the air. That includes voice acting, costuming. Love your costuming stuff. Your storytelling. These are all crucial skills we'll need in the wilderness when fans are left to keep the adventures going on our own. And I've got to tell you, you've got these skills in spades, and we will need them. Are you willing to give them to us? What about you, confused adipose? Yeah. Is Joe Street Film ready to step up and bear the weight of the fandom? Will the Echo Doctor be our doctor, or will any of your doctors be our doctor when there is no other? Maybe the Echo Doctor's face will be the next one to be canonized in an Every Doctor montage, the way the Scream of the Shalker one was. And, you know, that would be great. I would be here for that, but you have to be here for us. And what about you? The person watching this that doesn't have a channel for me to call out. Yeah, you too can help the fandom through the wilderness. And you can be rewarded on the other side. If you stand for the show when others only scoff at it and turn up their noses, those of us who believe in what the Doctor stands for, we will remember you for it and call you our champion. And it will give you weight when the show comes back to say, the fans want this, and let me tell you how I know it. I'm going to give the fans what they want, and you, the BBC, should hire me because they're waiting for me. They want me in that spot, and I know what they need. If you champion us, we will champion you, but you have to do it when there is no reward. There will not just be no reward, there will be waves on waves of people just crapping on you. The anti-woke, the cynicism, the people who love the show but feel betrayed by it. They're all gonna come for you. Your rickety productions will be taunted, even though they are exactly what we'll need. You gotta keep making them in the face of all of that. And that is a hard sell, and I know it is. But trust me when I say a third era of Doctor Who, I'm not counting Disney because it didn't go off the air, but a third true reboot of Doctor Who won't be the show we need without contributions from people like you. If you want to write an episode, look at what Gareth Roberts did in the Wilderness era and follow his example. You want to be the Doctor? Look at the call sheet for the made-for-TV movie. You'll see Peter Capaldi's name on there. You'll see John Hurt's name on there. You want to write and act? Look to the example that Mark Gatiss made for us in the Wilderness. Maybe you just like making things with your hands. You're a cosplayer or a prop builder or a set designer. Look at the example of those fans who had handmade props and costumes brought into the Curse of Fatal Death and which gave it the kind of full, complete look that really breathed life into it. And of course, if you want to be showrunner, look at RTD. And not just his writing either. Like we talked about, he talked about bringing back Doctor Who so much that he even got sick of hearing himself talk about it.
I remember thinking, I was really sort of kicking myself. And do you know what? The funny thing is, I wouldn't have done it again after that meeting, because I sort of walked away from that thinking, this is getting embarrassing.
Yet it was his recommendation that ultimately got the ball rolling again.
That was it. And I remember taking the train back to London thinking, okay, this is it.
It was literally that Linda Green press launch in the Lowry Hotel that forged the entire creation of Doctor Who.
He earned his seat at the table long before we all sat down to watch Rose. And that's the great opportunity which the new Wilderness era could provide for you. And it's not even just RTD you could look to. And no, I'm not talking about Moff and the Curse of Fatal Death, because his wife gave him that job. And that's not exactly a model that most of us can follow. Most of us aren't married to the creative heads at BBC. I don't know if you call that a Nepo baby. What's a Nepo baby if your wife gets you the job? What's the equivalent of a Nepo daddy? Oh my God, is that a thing? Is Stephen Moffat a fucking Nepo daddy? No, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking instead about Philip Siegel and his army of meanwhiles and never-weres. If you're not familiar with the name, I'm not surprised, but he is a British-born American TV exec who was obsessed with Doctor Who and wanted nothing more than to be the showrunner. He was a Crispy of another era. And he used everything he had to get the job. He used his Hollywood connections with every studio he worked at, from one job to the next, whether it was working with Amblin and Steven Spielberg or Fox Films. He used his connections to convince the BBC to do the joint effort that eventually culminated in the 1996 made-for-TV movie. And the failure of that movie, that film, it's not on him. It's really not. I know people, you can dissect it however you want to do it, but as an American, let me just tell you, no version of Doctor Who could have competed that year. They all would have failed. RTD Era 1 could have come out that night and it would have failed, because nothing was going to beat Roseanne in Sweeps Week. I promise you that. I talked about Dallas earlier. That Roseanne sequel, that was 10 times bigger than any Dallas. There was I won't spoil it. I guess, who cares if I spoil Roseanne? Her husband died. her husband died, or he had a heart attack, and it was the big coming back story after that cliffhanger. So there was no way that the average American was going to go watch this weird British thing when they could go keep up with every other American and watch the follow-up to the Roseanne finale. America just wasn't going to bite then, and the BBC wasn't going to move forward without us, which is important to remember because the BBC moves with the money, and that means you got to bring us along. You may not want to give us any kind of creative control, but you need to bring us along. So, despite never getting to make his version of the show because of this poor timing, he didn't actually get to be the true showrunner, but he did technically become the showrunner. He did get to put a version of the Doctor on screen, and his version of the Doctor, as portrayed by Paul McGann, is canon. So he cemented himself, and he did so by risking his reputation and leveraging his position at his job where his primary income came from, and banked everything on a TV movie that he pitted against the biggest show on TV. He pestered the BBC for years and leveraged everything he had, and he got what he wanted, despite the fact that he was an American TV exec. So that is the kind of thing that you could do, regardless of how big your platform is. That's obviously the far end of the spectrum. But as I said, there are numerous positions along the way that you could squeeze into this period. And we need that. We need that because whether or not you come along the whole way, we need whoever's going to be the showrunner, let's call it Crispy, to have you all to draw from. Because when he's coming around to make the new show, he's going to have to find actors. He's going to have to find musicians. He's going to have to find set designers. And you can make this easy for him by letting him know who the fans are that have those skills. Make it very obvious. Make it very easy for him, you know? That feeds in. Give him stories to work with. If you're a writer, write your fan fictions, write your novels, write your audio plays, write, and give him stories to draw from. That is what made the 2005 revival so good. If you don't do it, then, BBC will just make some cynical cash grab, and it's not going to be what you want, and it'll probably result in the same thing the 96 revival resulted in, which is next to nothing, and we'll be left empty-handed, and the fandom will just take another hit and degrade further. We need people of great faith and love and passion to be custodians and torchbearers in this time of uncertainty. This time of uncertainty that you all are asking for. Because again, time alone does nothing except create entropy. Now, I've attempted to enlighten you, to inform you and warn you of the dangers out in the wilderness, out beyond that threshold some of y'all think the show should intentionally cross. I've tried to give you some tips and motivation for getting through the wilderness, and have even offered you my own support, but in case none of that took, in case you just can't hear what I'm saying, or are hearing parts of what I'm saying and not digesting what it all means for you, allow me now to take the opportunity to threaten you. Because I am a hobbyist. YouTube is a hobby. I make this content because I want to. Because it's what I want to do. I don't make my money from it. I've got 20 subscribers. Even if I had 1,000 subscribers, 10,000 subscribers, I wouldn't monetize it because that's not the content I like. I create the content that I, as a viewer, want to see. And what I don't want to see is ads. And I don't want to see Patreons. And I don't want to see 10 minutes of people saying names at the end of their videos. I hate that crap. And I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to put testicle deodorant in my videos. I'm never going to put bullcrap, fake-ass therapy sessions in my content. I'm not going to do that. Because this is my hobby. And with my hobby, I'm going to make things that I like. I make my money printing. It's my full-time job, and I love printing. It's a passion of mine. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm also a sci-fi writer. That's what I'm also passionate about. It's what I went to school for. It's what I'm going to go to graduate school for. But even if my writing takes off and I get some stuff published, I'm still going to be a printer. That's my career. That's where my money comes from. And so if the show goes away and the algorithmic incentive to make Doctor Who content goes away with it, I'm still going to be here making the content because it's what I'm interested in. I have too many ideas to talk about to stop. And I don't have enough Whovian friends who are willing to listen to me yak. And even the ones who do, they don't like it like I like it. They'll never listen to me say all the crap I say to you guys. I need this outlet for my own sanity. So I am never going to leave this gig. Bear that in mind. Because as a sci-fi writer, I am always looking for an avenue to explore my stories. It's not my dream to write for Doctor Who, that's y'all. But if y'all disappear along with the show, especially if you all who are creators and influencers who built your house on Doctor Who's foundations, if you all abandon it when things get tough, I will spread through your houses like a black mold in the voids you leave behind. And the next time the BBC comes sniffing around America for a bag of cash, which you know they will, because they always do, like they did in '96 and again in 2021, when they come sniffing, I'm the one they're gonna find. And then my ignorant, big-headed American ass will be showrunner, and you don't want that. Because I'm going to make the Doctor's companion a rail-thin Pinoy boy with hair down to his ass so I can self-insert myself from one side of time and space to the other. You don't want to see that. And I'll make sure I bring all my American friends with me. I'll get the Sonic sisters out here with me. They said in their last video they want to be in Doctor Who. I'll put them in Doctor Who. You think I won't? I'll put anyone in Doctor Who. I'll make it an American product. That's not how it should be, though. It's a British cultural institution. So I'm telling you all now, I'm threatening you all right now. Don't dematerialize when Doctor Who does. Otherwise, I will take your show from you. Because I understand what the wilderness really means. And I will take advantage of it if you don't. Well, friends, this has been a fun one. I had a blast. I had an absolute blast doing the research for this. I got to watch so much cool stuff, read so many cool stories. I got to know about new people that I didn't know about before. I only really started investigating the wilderness just a few weeks ago because I just keep hearing these conversations online, and I feel like it was bullcrap, and I had to do my homework, but the more I did, the more my thesis solidified itself. I had the inkling that y'all were missing something, and the more I dug, the more I could see, like, yeah, y'all are missing something. We can't just send the show away. That's not the answer. I hope that you found some value in the answers that I gave. I hope that I've inspired some of you to, be steadfast, to be stalworthy, and to hold down the fandom in a time of crisis should the show go away again. And it's important to remember that, like, if you just think you're taking a break, the show went away because they're waiting for Disney and it's going to be 18 months, and so I'll create content in 18 months. Even in that short period of time, all of these lessons still apply. So don't undersell the importance of our contributions to the fandom when the show stops. Like I said, I've had a blast here. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. If you disagree with me, please tell me why. Roast me, take me to task. If you think this whole video is flawed on its face, slap a thumbs down button. If you never want to hear from me again, well...
Somebody just passed me this and says, don't subscribe.
Don't subscribe.
Don't subscribe.
Well, how could I possibly...
Don't subscribe.
For goodness sake.
Don't subscribe.
Don't
Subscribe.
Don't
Subscribe.
Don't
Subscribe.
You got the message, haven't you?